Byron Severson. Did I say that right?
Severson, yes.
Severson. Okay. Um, it looks like you have built a career around aircraft sales.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay. And then it looks like a couple years ago you transitioned into building an app uh, platform that connects aircraft operators with aircraft maintenance providers.
That's correct. Yeah. I wouldn't say transitioned. I still have an aircraft sales career.
Okay.
This is my nights and weekends thing, and my love labor on the side, I guess you could say, or labor of love on the side. So
Sure.
still a Falcon Jet salesperson as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're out of Texas, is that correct?
Yeah. I live 15 minutes drive, one stoplight from DFW Airport. Little town called South Lake, sort of bucolic little place, really close to the airport.
Do you have any experience as a pilot?
I do. I have not a lot of total time. I have about 2,300 hours. I have 2 type ratings, an ATP. Was fortunate to get my most recent type rating this spring in a Falcon 7X. Have virtually no time in it, but have the type rating. And so most of my time's in Barons and Bonanzas, and that's actually what led to the development of the app. Was my sole ownership experience was a 40-year-old Baron.
Okay.
And that's probably a natural segue if you want to cut to that right now.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So I bought the airplane in 2016, and I'd sold Barons in my past. I mean, I know the network somewhat well, I guess, or I know that there is a substantial network of providers and parts and things like that. And but being relatively new to the Dallas area, I wouldn't say I had an extended network of service providers. And a 40-year-old airplane needs a lot of maintenance, as you know. And so I had a lot of opportunities to look for maintenance. My local provider, a guy named Bill Fritsch, was very helpful at helping me find providers when I needed it. But ultimately, he would know 1 or 2 people, or maybe one person. And I was like, why can't I find 3 or 4 people so that I could call and get better availability, maybe get some competitive pricing. And then there were other times where I'd land, have an AOG, and I'm like, well, how do I find who's going to fix my airplane right now? And Google search terms were terrible. If you went to, some of the message boards for the airplanes, they were pretty good at returning answers in a few days. So, so I was like, there should be an app to connect us with good service providers. And that was the genesis of it.
So what size airport were you keeping your aircraft at the time?
I kept it in 2 different airports. Maybe you've flown into Alliance, AFW.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of military in and out of there, which is really cool. If you're based there, you get to see a lot of cool jets and T-38s and all sorts of things, A-10s. And then I kept it, so I had it in a common hangar there with some great people. And then I saw an opportunity to go get my own T hangar in Denton, which is a Delta Tango Oscar, DTO. And I had a T hangar for about 2 years.
Okay. So I'm guessing that the maintenance there just doesn't exist. Is that kind of how it is? Or there's one guy, he's an A&P, and he kind of puts his business card up on the cork board in the FBO?
Yeah, interesting. So Alliance, as a bigger airport, really doesn't have any services like that. You've got to call out people from, other airports to come with their truck and their tools. Denton has a surprising and substantial number of service providers.
Okay.
All relatively, small, 2 and 3 person, maybe, 6, 8 people at the maximum type shops, generally speaking, for the smaller airplanes. But they're, like I said, they're not really well represented. Like if you wanted to figure out which one, specializes in my Baron or has experience here, there's really no way to find that out without making a bunch of phone calls.
So you decide that this needs to be built.
Mhm.
What's the first thing you do? How do you get from an idea um, to an app?
First thing I did was sell the airplane.
Sure,
Got to have some money to build the app. I
you
figured
do.
that. And then, my wife and I put out the feelers, I guess you could say, and we located somebody on shore here in the U.S. That could develop the app, and we got started.
What was your level of knowledge for web design, web development at that time?
Pretty weak in today's terms. I had way back in the, let's see, early 2000s. I had an interest in coding, but a very minimal interest, just like a side interest. And so I got HTML for Dummies and read it through, and I built a couple of websites using HTML, but very, very basic and laughable. So that was the extent of it. Going forward, no better than anybody else that uses an iPhone or an Android, just a general knowledge. Yep.
Did you even know what you were looking for during the vetting process, or did you just kind of, you know, cast a wide net and see what stuck?
It was more of a, how would I put it? Oh, what's the term? Anyway, when you have a sort of a meeting of the minds, you have a very good,
Okay.
chemistry.
Yep, of course.
Yeah, that's what it was. So we had a very good chemistry right from the start, and so that really is what made the difference. Made it a pretty easy choice. How about you? I ask you the same question. I know you're building an app as well. So how did you locate did you go through a few people or did
I
you?
did. I've got a couple horror stories also from the early days for a different time. Um, the hardest thing for me early on was I had the big idea, but I didn't have it broken down um, into how to build it. And I had no skills in terms of PowerPoint or Photoshop. So I ended up just getting a piece of graph paper and I used colored pencils and I drew out 40 different images.
Sounds.
Um, so that's kind of how I translated my idea to my first developers.
Yeah.
And actually that process has served me well ever since then. I've never gotten good at Photoshop or anything, so I still sketch. But yeah,
I find that to be useful as well. There's nothing, it's a cathartic in a way, right? You've got a great idea or you feel you do.
yep,
Uh, Really, like, and I'm a horrible artist, but it does really help your developer understand what you're trying to do, right? If you can put.
exactly. So you basically come to him with an idea, and I'm speculating, but he probably gave you some huge number. It's going to cost you this much to build it. Um, did you guys come to like an equity agreement early on, or just you sold an airplane, so you had a few dollars laying around? How
Yeah.
how did that get kickstarted? And um, I'm guessing that it probably has exceeded the expense of that airplane just based on personal experience.
Yeah, I won't get into too much of that, but
Sure.
the cost was surprising to say the
Hmm.
least. Um, but yeah, I guess I wish I could say there was some formula I used or something like that, but you kind of look at, what the budget is that you have, what it's going to cost to build it, and then how much you think it's going to take to get the business started.
Yep.
And if I had any advice, it would be take that number times two, and then you have enough.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. And then once you spent that number, you're like, I'm too deep. I'm
Yeah.
gonna come up with some more cash or figure out an alternate solution. So
Amen.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that everybody that's ever created a product similar to this has um, kind of gone down a very similar path.
Yeah.
Your product, Tally Ho. Well, first off, Tally Ho. How did you come up with that name, and how long did it take to come up with? Because that's not always an easy task either.
I don't actually recall when I came up with it. It's just a word I've always liked. And people ask me, I had an opportunity to be on the Corporate Jet Investor town hall a few weeks back, and it's hosted by a British host. And he said, "Oh, I like your name, Tally Ho, because it's it originates from British fox hunting. And when you
Oh, I
spot
didn't know that.
when you spot the fox, the hunters are supposed to call out Tally Ho."
Okay.
And I don't know the exact history when that translated over to American aviation, but as you probably know, it's become vernacular. It's kind of colloquial, obviously, but when an air traffic controller calls out traffic, your I guess I would call it your official call out is supposed to be tally ho, and but most people just say I have the traffic now.
Yeah, they both work. Yep.
They both work.
Yeah, I remember when I was trying to come up with names for mine, I trying to find something where the .com's available and the socials are available.
Yeah, so the first time I looked at tallyho.com, first and second, I kept coming back to it because I liked the name for a while before I got started. And some person, I can't remember how I knew this, if their email ended in .ru or what, but some appeared to be Russian person responded and said they wanted $30,000 for it. I was like, man, I'd have to really it's silly.
Yep.
So quick story for, advisory, on that. If you're an aviation related business, .arrow is a common and it's very available. And I didn't know that. So I had, somebody that's helping me with some social media marketing ferret that out for me. Initially, we were tallyho.pro, Pro, and we've just recently switched to tallyho.arrow.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen the .arrow. I was looking at the .pro earlier.
Yeah.
You essentially serve two customers, the aircraft owner and the service provider.
Yeah. Well put.
It's the classic chicken and the egg scenario. Am I right?
Yes, it is.
How'd you overcome that challenge?
Who says we have?
Touche.
B to B to C.
Yep.
It's a really interesting challenge. I wouldn't say we've overcome it yet, to be honest. We have a very nice group of service providers. We went out with some, let's call it very strong incentives at the very beginning because we figured they're the chicken. And so we needed to get them. So we got several tens of service providers to agree to our initial terms. And now, even though I wouldn't necessarily call that a completely solid core or whatever, it shows the utility of the app, we think. And
Yep.
so we're into our what we call a paywall at this point, and signing paid subscribers, at our list price, I guess you could say, going forward.
So is that the business model then? The aircraft operators pay the fee?
No. Just the service providers pay a subscription to
Okay.
promote on the app. Yeah, and following that, the users can get on for free.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely a huge challenge. Obviously, like you said, the B2B and the B2C, it's really hard to get one without the other. And then you get that barrier to entry of a price attached to it. I'm sure it's caused many sleepless nights how to tackle that.
For sure. Lots of debates.
Lots of debates. Yeah.
How do you monetize, if you don't mind me asking, how do you monetize your own
app? So for the military version, just charging each squadron.
Okay.
So every flying squadron has, we'll call it discretionary spending accounts. So I just keep it under that amount. So that being said, I have not charged anybody yet, because I started this rebuild actually at the very beginning of COVID. Um, and I did not feel right charging somebody knowing that they were going to have to go through another MVP. So hopefully this summer I'll start billing people, invoicing customers. So we'll see how that goes.
All right, so I
Now,
got that. Did you
yeah,
have that moment in March as things were shutting down?
say that again. You cut out.
Oh, sorry. I said, did you have that moment in March when everything started shutting down where you had to make or break decision? Like, I'm either, this is almost crazy because I don't know what's coming of the world after this. So it's either completely crazy or it's really smart for me to move forward with this app.
Well, I was so invested at that point. I was moving forward regardless.
Gotcha.
There's a little bit, uh, I'm not sure what the word is. I don't know if stability is the right word, but the military is not as impacted by the economy as, say, um, an aircraft owner, for example, who
Mm,
more than likely, depending on the situation, doesn't need the aircraft. So either he'll delay maintenance or he'll sell the airplane.
right.
Um, so it's a little bit different there. Um, for me in that situation, I actually kind of saw it as an opportunity to utilize the free time that I was going to have by not flying my civilian job very often to just hustle and uh, I actually did some extensive vetting with my developer to get the right one, um, and then um, actually brought him on as an equity developer. Uh,
I like the idea what do you call it? A developer with equity too. I think a a lower risk way keeps, hate to say it, but keeps them honest too.
yep.
Uh, that's a really sketchy process, can be.
So um, my developer, um, when I showed him what I had, instead of me showing him drawings, I had a working product. I'm like, I need this, but I want um, encryption built in, and I want to expand here, expand there. I want this feature to work differently. Anyways, he had something to work from. He saw it working comprehensively from the beginning. He's like, all right, he estimated about $70,000 to just build what's there. I'm like, but I'm gonna want more. Like this isn't an end. And like you said, double it, right?
It's
Um,
like a house, right? You start off with a budget, and then they say, well, what about this upgrade? Or you see
yep,
upgrade, right? And it just keeps going.
100%.
There's a lot
So
of
yeah,
commonalities with building a home and building code.
yep, exactly. And he's all in. He's excited. He's working his ass off. Our our visions are aligned.
Mm-hmm.
So we tailored um, the contract so that he gets paid first, um, so that he's incentivized and he can still feed his family and wants to keep working,
Yeah,
even though it might take a little while for me to make any money. So,
yeah.
but yeah, again, context for where I'm coming from. That's probably a good segue into your team. Is it Byron and a developer, or do you have a growing team behind you now?
We are growing. We have it's myself and a developer. We have 4 salespeople, some people that have come from the aviation industry, and that's been an interesting process. Have some very good people, reaching out to all of the different service providers. We think there's somewhere between 10 and 15,000 in the U.S. So there's a lot of calls to be made and a lot of people to be contacted. I have a couple of different people, doing contract work for me for marketing, for social media, and for marketing strategy. Um, and that's a very good thing, by the way, is doing some before you have to hire people, just do some contract work. You may not need a full-time person.
Yep.
advice I would recommend is try to find good, reputable people, for a few hours a week instead of that one great person for 40, 160 hours a month or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, that's the other thing too. Pre-revenue is, how do I incentivize these people to to work for free, essentially.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that's what you're doing, but you definitely, um, the budget for employees in my situation is very challenging. It's like, all right, how do I keep you incentivized, motivated? Um, it's a tough problem for every startup, I think.
Yeah, you kind of
But
almost find, and I don't know if this is the right solution, I'm just spitballing out loud, but it's almost like you got to find people with day jobs that just want to champion you somehow and are, you
yep,
know, like the idea, like you, they're willing to spend 15 minutes a day calling two of their cronies on it. A lot of good ideas exist in vacuums, and as soon as you open up the vacuum, you find that they're not good ideas.
yep.
So, and there's a great book a friend gave me, and I hope I can remember the name of it. But it basically proves the point, or considers the point of getting, public, getting feedback on your idea before you go to market. And so I was actually starting to build already, and and we had a couple of different things in Tally Ho. We were going to have, sort of like a Zillow-like aircraft finder as well, because that was something that was near and dear to me from, all my airplane sales experience. And the more we talked to people, the more they said, nah, I'm good with controller, ASO, all that stuff. Um, and I was like, it would frustrate me, it pissed me off, frankly. I was like, I feel like this idea, you start to get the feel like you should be Bill Gates and say, well, they don't know what they need, so let me just build what they need anyway. But you got to have some big cojones. Mine aren't as big as Bill Gates. And so, what we kept getting on the feedback from people was, when we talk about, well, what about if we added services to this? That's where we got really strong feedback, almost 100%, where people say, hey, I would use it. That's something where there's a need. Here's how I'm solving the problem. The current solutions to the problem aren't good ones. And so we actually pivoted to do just services, very early on, thankfully. So that was some good advice I got.
When you were kind of quote unquote pitching the idea back in
Mhm.
the day to get that feedback, were you hesitant that people would steal your idea?
Um, that's a great question. Probably not as careful as I should have been in some ways. I guess I knew enough at that point about the cost to build something, and the effort that it was going to take. And also, even though people said, I really like that idea, I guess the people I was talking to, I was a little bit careful with. Like even the guys that were airplane owners, owner pilots who certainly had the wherewithal, the ones I talked to are sort of, if I can say it, past their peak.
Sure.
They probably weren't going to have the energy to go do something like this. So
it was in the back of your mind, but you hedged to kind of protect it based on um, the relationships you had. And the
yeah,
reason I bring that up, and I've kind of talked about this on previous podcasts, is I think a lot of people early on are like, hey, I've got this idea. I'll tell you, but I need you to sign an NDA or something along those lines, right? But like you said, you knew what was involved. You knew the expense. You knew the time. Um, I don't know if you ever listened to Gary Vaynerchuk or not, but
yeah,
his thing, he's got the saying, he's like, ideas are shit, execution is the game,
yeah,
right? Everybody he has an idea, but to actually execute on it is, it takes a certain type of personality. Um, and for those that are executing or are executors, they're already executing on other stuff. They don't have time to take your idea. So it's one of those things that, um, for those executors out there, like you and I are talking, like, um, I'm all about helping. So if there's anything down the road, and we can talk later, I have some ideas how I'd like to help. And it's, the way I look at it, I don't want anything in return. And you get people, in the startup world, you're working on a shoestring budget, and the people that can help, um, forming long-term contacts are a lot of times more fruitful than a transaction. So, and I think that's relatively common, especially those that have startups that have risked it all and put their family's financial futures on the line. I think
Yeah.
there's definitely a certain amount of respect there.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
right.
Marketing. How are you marketing Tally Ho?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's probably the thing that every sales guy or salesperson maybe thinks they're a great marketer, but you're not necessarily. Just because you know how to sell something doesn't mean you know how to build awareness of it on a grand scale. So it's a challenge. I think you do a bunch of things. You don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Some people are really good at building something that gets viral, and they build awareness of their product that way, or service. I find that it's a variety of buckets, and generally speaking, unless you're that brilliant person that knows how to make something get viral, it's really just constant discipline and effort on all those different buckets. So part of it's social media, part of it's email, creating a newsletter. What you're doing here is brilliant. Doing podcasts, and I really thank you for the opportunity to do this, by the way. Um, I think it's all of those things, exhibits and shows, and there's so many. The great thing about today's economy, I think, is in the past, I don't think there was a great way to do it without spending. You had to have money to market, and now with email and social media, I have somebody help me because they're much more creative and they make the social media look professional. But even if we didn't have that, you take a shot with your cell phone, you put a few words and hashtags on it, and you've got a post. So
Yep.
you can guerrilla market the thing if you need to.
Yep. Strategic partners. Have you considered, or do you have any strategic partners that you're working with to maybe in um, a parallel industry that are talking about you or working with you?
Yeah, it's something we're thinking about. Not necessarily in a parallel industry, but probably in the industry. And we have a couple of ideas on who that should be. Yeah, but nothing formal yet that
Yep.
that I about.
Yep.
I think it's an important piece, though. For growth, I think you have to have it.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. That's another thing too. I'm talking about me a lot on this. I definitely try not to do that.
No,
I
you're doing.
just
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
for relate, and hopefully it maybe throw some ideas out there at you. For the military, we use every time we land our aircraft logs. There's another company who digitized that, and they saw what we're doing with ProFlight. His product brings a lot of value to ProFlight too. So there's perfect example of a strategic partnership that is mutually beneficial for all parties, and there doesn't have to be a transaction up front there either. Just essentially um, providing that product for people that are using mine, and vice versa, because he'll sell ProFlight every time he sells his product, and I'll sell his whenever I'm pushing mine. So
That's a good finding, and I think you also have to go in with some confidence. I'm not speaking to you in this case, but others that you'll get offers, right, of strategic partnerships that don't fit,
right.
and you have to know, don't be a pushover on that. And sometimes it's easy to fall in love with somebody that falls in love with your idea, right?
Yep.
And you got to spot those and say, I don't think that's quite the right fit.
Yep, exactly. That's like you said. I've let some other people's opinions take me down, not necessarily the wrong path, but maybe the more expensive path. And I find out after it's too late, well, I probably didn't need to waste my resources uh, going down that direction. But
Right.
um, wrapping up, you know, you kind of touched on marketing. We briefly touched on COVID. Um, I would imagine that one of the most efficient ways to get tally ho in front of both parties are going to the um, NBAA type shows.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that COVID has put a damper on that.
Yes and no. We were definitely planning on NBAA. That was high on our list, and they have a really neat thing every year, and something for you as well, possibly. Is they have like a new innovators, like an innovators corner or something like that, with a much reduced booth price. You know, the space is smaller, but if people want to just go through the innovation section, it takes them 2 minutes. It's not off in some corner. It's in a pretty nice space. So that's what we were planning to do. This year, we were able to do something called the U.S. Aircraft Expo.
Okay.
We just finished our second one of those. We actually launched the product, sort of soft launch, I would say, in the App Store at the first one of that we attended, which was in Addison, September 26th or so, and then we just did the last one of the year, which was in Scottsdale. So, but yeah, I mean, you know, we from the first one to the last one, and probably those two shows combined with the corporate jet investor, little town hall that I did online. You know, we were able to achieve about 100 downloads a week across those three things, and also, you know, elbow grease and calling and stuff like that. But that's not a ton, obviously, but we weren't really even seeking users at that point. It was more just to see what we could do. We were more focused on getting service providers at that point, the chicken.
Yep.
So, yeah, shows are definitely good. I think schedulers and dispatchers, I just learned that got canceled next year. So they're going to have a virtual convention. So, you know, we're going to look at this NBAA virtual convention and see what that looks like. It's pretty unique software.
Have you done a virtual yet?
I have not. Have you?
I have not. I'd be very curious to see how that plays out.
So we're going to check that out. If it looks like useful, then we'll probably do that for S&D next.
Yep. Awesome. Um, is there anything that you wished I would have asked, or anything that you'd like to discuss before we wrap it up?
I think, you know, the main thing as an entrepreneur, what I'm learning is it's almost kind of like, this is going to sound depressing, but it's almost like depression or a mental illness or something like that. That sounds funny. But the thing is, a lot of times you'll go through a lot of things as you're an entrepreneur, and you'll think that you're alone, that nobody else has ever experienced that. And then as long as you go and talk to some people and get a group of entrepreneurs, you know, around you, you're going to find out that that's not the case.
Yep.
The struggles that you and I have had, you know, development wise, I've even had some, you know, learning the trade, and, you know, overspending or under, you know, budgeting or whatever. Almost everybody that goes through software development goes through what you and I have gone through.
Yep.
So, you know, just make sure you put good people around you. And I need to take that on my own advice so more often.
Yep.
Ask people; they're willing to help.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've learned to do is accept help and ask for it, because
Mm-hmm.
it definitely, the ego can get involved, and it does more harm than good sometimes. And with that being said, you know, anything we can do, more than happy to help out. You know, if you hit some milestone in the future and you want to come on and talk again, hopefully our network will be bigger. Um, but if there's anything that you can think of with me or my network, absolutely 100%. Um, do not hesitate to ask. And don't think that the ask has a price tag associated with it.
Well, that's awesome, Tyler. And let me extend the same. So I got 23 years, all of it in business aviation. So, you know, anything where you're thinking about business aviation wise, there's a lot of stuff I don't know, but I generally know somebody who does and would be happy to connect you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate your valuable time.